Pokemon Scarlet and Violet just got even better. And with this new presence, there is just a lot more to this region. So in this video, I want to look at some of the details of Gen 9, this huge open map, all these new areas, the 3 stories, this game's gimmick, and even more. So let's start with this game's gigantic map, the Paldea region. Now, unlike past games where there was a ton of inaccessible areas, this is just one continuous, uninterrupted map, which is pretty cool. Now, we might have seen a ton of places and areas in trailers, but it doesn't directly show us what our adventure will look like. So here's how it could potentially turn out. This journey will probably start at the bottom of the map, where we have our house and what I'm guessing is Nemona's house, considering our rival is generally our neighbor in other Pokemon games. Next, our adventure could take us higher towards the big city that we see everywhere in the trailers. And when we take a closer look, this is probably one of the biggest cities we've seen in a Pokemon game. So this location has that school, the big type circle, and I'm assuming after you go through this area, you're free to go wherever and the world opens up. But we have one more small detail. In the top left corner, we have this cave which leads to this area that could potentially be the Pokemon League. It can't be a gym since all other gyms are in these boxier buildings, and it's a secluded spot which is pretty fitting for a Pokemon League. Now, if this is the case, I hope that this cave or Victory Road that leads to this is somewhat of a challenge and not a straight line. And the final thing to this map is obviously this massive hole in the center of the region. Now, while it's covered in clouds, I have a few thoughts of what this could be. Looking at another version of the map, there's obviously land there, so it's not just a large body of water or emptiness. It has to have some sort of purpose. So, number 1, it could be a post-game area that we can't get to since this mountain would be too steep and the legendaries can't climb it yet. Or number 2, which is most likely, it could be a late-game area related to the legendaries. And looking back at the other map, we can see a dark green-looking spot, which could be a thick forest. Now that would make a lot of sense since reptiles like these legendaries tend to prefer rainforests. Then the post-game area could also be located at the top right with this darker area, which could easily be a tall mountain, which would make for a hard threatening zone. Alright, since we've taken a fair look at the map, let's go over these 3 stories. Now the first one is obviously the gyms, and for the other 2, the second one must have something to do with this star logo, and the last one might be this treasure hunt or something to do with the gimmick. We were sort of hinted this during the second trailer with these 3 things next to one another. But anyway, let's start with our first story. We already know a bit about the gyms. You have more freedom, there's no order to them, and they don't conflict with the other 2 stories. However, the first odd occurrence is that gym battles don't seem to take place inside the gyms. And it's not just this ice city, others have battlefields outside as well. Maybe the explanation is that people in the towns like to gather and watch these fights? But what does that mean for the inside of the gym? Is there anything in there in the first place? Maybe this means that the gym missions take place outside. I suppose this makes sense since the gym looks pretty small considering the battlefield outside seems a lot larger. Another theory is that this terrestrialization phenomenon, the gimmick of the game, can only take place outdoors, which I'd assume these gym leaders would use as well. Now, after you collect all these 8 badges, it gets more interesting. Instead of battling the Elite Four and the Champion, in Paldea you're supposed to take this Champion's assessment test. Unfortunately, it sounds a bit boring, but it could still very well send us through Victory Road and the Elite Four. It might just be some sort of rebranding. Okay, now let's move on to the second story, which I bet has something to do with an evil organization. In the trailer, we see the main character riding towards this fort, which is definitely some sort of hideout. I mean, this looks pretty menacing with all the spikes on it. We're definitely not supposed to be here. Next, we have this car or some sort of vehicle which has that star plastered all over it. This sort of reminds me of all the goofy machines that Jesse and James from Team Rocket would build during the anime. It could also very well be a Pokemon, though this vehicle is definitely owned by the evil team. However, the only thing that's a bit off-putting is that these 2 flags that might designate this evil team's territory are actually massive, so maybe this team is more threatening than we thought. In short, in the second story, we could travel around the map to extinguish this team's plans. I doubt that it's going to revolve around the 2 main legendaries. And if it does include a legendary Pokemon, it could be a sub-legendary or a third legendary Pokemon. Now, since we have Nimona telling us about gyms in the first story, and we see Arven helping us in the third story, then maybe Penny could help us out in the second story. This would make a lot of sense. We have 3 rivals and 3 stories. Now, for the last one, this one isn't nearly as straightforward. In this one, we have this glowing thing. We have this earthquake and a lot of tall towers. So I think that these glowing things could be similar to the Max mushrooms in Sword and Shield, since these gimmicks have a lot in common, like the raid battles. This means that with this glowing plant, you could change the Terra type of your Pokemon. Now, for this earthquake, I think this is some kind of energy that could tie into the gimmick, or maybe it could be a legendary Pokemon that's awakening. And last, these towers. So in the same shot, we have this tower in the back, and they showcase this tower after the glowing thing once again, clearly meaning that all of these are tied together. This tower could be like in Zelda, how you needed to visit them to show more of the map, but in the context of the story, that just doesn't fit. Not being able to see more of the map would impact the other stories. And we're told that these stories are pretty independent. Maybe these are something else. Maybe you use them to show certain spots of the map. So it could show us locations of the glowing plant, or maybe even showing us Terra raids. Alright, so gyms, Evil Team, and Gimmick, that's what our 3 stories could potentially look like. But one last thing that I was wondering, what do the professors do? Clearly they didn't make the Pokedex since apparently Jacques developed it. It doesn't seem like they researched the terrestrial phenomenon since in recent Pokemon trailers they've always told us what the objectives of the professors are. The only thing that is confirmed is that they are researching a certain lore in the Paldea region. Anyway, that's all I have for now. It's insane how many little details they have in the presents, and hopefully we'll discover even more soon. But for now, there's a ton to look forward to. Thank you for watching.